is Hannah, and today I'm going to be wrapping up all of the books that I read in October. You'll forgive my tardiness in posting this. My Halloween movie wrap-up video did me in. I had to take a brief sabbatical. So in October, I had what the kids might call a bad reading month. The books themselves were fine. They ranged anywhere from fine to spectacular. Like, I still had a 5-star read this month, but my reading of the books was bad. So in October, my job enters our busy season, and I was watching at least a movie every day, oftentimes more than one. And honestly, most of my good book thinking comes when I'm not actually reading. It comes when I'm just kind of thinking about what I've been reading. So basically I'd be in a frenzy all day at work and then try to come home and critically watch a movie for 2 hours, and then by the end of the night all I would want to do is eat pizza rolls and watch TikTok for 2 hours and go to bed. So I did not get a lot of good pondering in the month of October. So that's obviously not ideal, but it does mean I'm going to be able to wrap up all of the books that I read this month in one video because I just don't have very much to say about any of them. I still read 6 books, which is good. I set my goal at the beginning of the year with the intention of reading about 5 books a month. I have exceeded that every month. I already beat my Goodreads goal, so it's not terrible news. But I probably would have been better off reading fewer books more in depth. Reading fewer books better. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're just gonna get started. The first book that I finished was All Systems Red by Martha Wells. I listened to the audiobook on Libby. It's one of those that's just been on my radar a really long time. Comes very highly recommended from people with pretty widely varying reading tastes, which is always something that's kind of interesting to me. I just kind of want something short to listen to while I was going on a trip, and the audiobook is about 3 hours, so perfect. All Systems Red is the first installment in the Murderbot Diaries book series. The main character is this semi-synthetic humanoid robot. He calls himself Murderbot, and he's supposed to be a security robot, but he's kind of hacked his own system, and he doesn't really care for the work that he does. There's a quote that I really liked that said, "As a heartless killing machine, I was a complete failure," and that pretty succinctly sums up Murderbot as a character. I really liked it. Everyone always talks about how interesting of a main character Murderbot is, and that is completely true. He's literally just hanging around everyone is scared of me and I don't want to do my job. I just want to hang out and watch TV, and that is just really funny, and I feel like that's not something I read very much in a main character. But yeah, I don't have too much to say beyond I liked it. It was really short again, so I probably will continue the series. All of the books are pretty short, so it's probably going to be a good one to kind of slot in between other books that I'm reading, so big fan. So, God, the second book I finished was Summer Suns by Lee Mandello. I read it as an audio arc from NetGalley. I initially saw it, say it with me now, on TikTok. The pitch of this book is a little difficult to explain. So, our main character is Andrew, and we meet him just after the death of his lifelong best friend, Eddie. Eddie's death ostensibly looks like a suicide. Andrew has his doubts, obviously. So Andrew goes to Vanderbilt to start grad school where Eddie had started a couple months ahead of him. And he's basically just trying to piece together what happened in the last few months of Eddie's death. It was the first few months of their lives that they were kind of apart from each other. So Andrew moves into Eddie's house. He inherits his friends and his roommate. They're in the same grad program, so he's trying to continue his research. And also, he's seeing this weird ghost specter thing. So it's a difficult pitch to try to say succinctly. This book was weird. I got in the E arc, and I got maybe 15% of the way through it, and it just felt like it was taking forever. Like, I felt like I was reading it nonstop and just not getting anywhere with it, and I couldn't really tell where it was going. So I actually initially DNF'd it with like only half of an intention to continue the book. But on a lark, a couple weeks later, I checked back on NetGalley and there was an audio arc, and that definitely helped. So yeah, the audio was definitely the way to go on this one for me. The audiobook narrator does have this like southern drawl that kind of comes and goes kind of without reason. One of the main characters is named Riley, and the audiobook narrator kept saying a character's name was like Riley, and I was like, who's Riley? And I was like, oh, that's Riley. It's just, that's the only word with an accent on it in the whole sentence. Awesome. Vibe-wise, this book lands somewhere between like the Raven cycle and Supernatural. It kind of has this like very gothic feel to it. It was a little all over the place. I generally did like it. There's some really cool characters. I love that they're like at the university and they're like studying folklore. I think that's really cool. But some of the supernatural elements were explained really strangely. It seemed like more weight was given to like the metaphor in the language than clarity. So it's just kind of difficult to follow sometimes. And just overall, I think what gave me so much grief when I first tried to read it, the writing is very like dense. There would be 10 words where 3 words would have done and been plenty. So that could have been stronger. And the ending was kind of blah. I didn't care for the ending. All I have to say, I liked it all right. It was fine. The next book I finished was Come Closer by Sarah Gran. I listened to the audiobook on Hoopla. So it's a shorter horror book. This woman kind of starts noticing strange things in her surroundings and in her own thoughts and behavior. And she kind of comes to figure out that she is possessed. Exciting. Like that pitch alone, it's kind of the whole book. It's very, very short. These shorter audiobooks were kind of like my saving grace with getting something read this month. Like this audiobook was about 4 hours. Even though it was like sub 4 hours, it felt really slow for some reason. It wasn't particularly scary or like tense, and I wasn't like, you know, clamoring to read it when I had to pause it. Yeah, this one was another kind of oddball. The main character was kind of interesting, and like the demon was pretty cool. Honestly, just as she was like becoming possessed and her behavior was changing, I was just kind of like, good for her. Like, your husband shouldn't speak to you like that, which I think is not the point. It's supposed to be the point. I just feel like this might have been better off as like a short story, because it didn't need to be 4 hours long even. Yeah, to be completely honest, I finished it in a couple days and I hadn't really thought about it afterwards, so kind of unfortunate. The next book I finished was Truth of the Divine by Lindsay Ellis. I read the e-arc. I think all of the arcs, audio and ebook that I got this month, have since come out. So I kind of read all of these under the wire, my bad. Truth of the Divine is, of course, the sequel to Axiom's End, which I loved. Axiom's End is a very cool, very unique first contact with aliens story, and the Truth of the Divine is kind of the like legal and jurisdictional fallout from aliens being present on Earth. This was pretty good. I don't think I liked it as much as Axiom's End though, and part of that is me again being like a very uninvolved reader this month. It is pretty long. I don't know how long it is in paper pages. My ebook was like 1,200 pages on my phone. Not that that necessarily means anything. So I read this really slowly. And there is a sizable section where the plot, the big picture plot kind of stops. The conflict goes from very like external to very internal. And I think I was just like not mentally prepared to read something like that thought heavy, I guess. But yeah, it just felt like it kind of ground to a halt when I know it didn't. There was like really great character work happening, but I think my brain just wanted aliens. So I'm definitely going to continue the series. I love Lindsay Ellis, and I still think Axiom's End is a brilliant book. I think there's going to be like 4 or 5 installments in this series, so maybe this was just like my least favorite book in the series, in a series that I like. So that was a little disappointing because this was one of my like most anticipated books of the year, and the fact that it didn't like grab me was a little bit of a letdown. But again, a lot of that's my fault. Another one of my most anticipated books of the year was Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney, which was my next read. Now, I read this one physically, obviously, over the course of like a month and a half. I bought it like the day after it came out in September, and it just took me a really long time to finish it. However, I loved it. This month felt like a sea of books that were fine but didn't really get to me. This book got to me. Oh my god. In this book, there are 2 friends. They live on opposite sides of Ireland. One lives in Dublin, one lives on the West Coast, as well as like their respective love interests and their love lives. Every other chapter are emails that they are sending back and forth to each other. And the emails almost read like essays. But they're still like letters between friends. So they talk about like each other and their friendship, but they also talk about like history and religion and the world and politics. And it's so good. There was kind of this prevailing wisdom for a long time, I feel like, on BookTube, that you either loved conversations with friends and hated normal people, or you loved normal people and hated conversations with friends. I loved normal people, and I really liked conversations with friends, so I was very curious to see how I would feel about this, and I love this. I think I like this best of the 3. It's one of those books that doesn't have a tremendous amount of plot going on, but there are just these huge conversations happening, like just between these 2 friends about like literally everything in life, and it was just it was so good. I genuinely just felt so moved and so seen by so much of the stuff they were saying to each other. I cried like a bajillion times reading this, and nothing would even be happening. There would just be like one really lovely paragraph, or like they would go to church, and I'm not a church person, but they would like go to church and be like, that was really nice. And I'm like, oh my god. So yes, I did take over a month to read this book, but that is not a comment on this book. I really just wanted to like savor it and kind of live in it and, you know, take my time experiencing reading this book, because I could tell pretty early on that this was going to be like a really special reading experience, and it really, really was. I really liked it. And the final book that I read this month was Before We Disappear by Sean David Hutchinson. I got the audio arc from NetGalley. I, however, did not realize, thank you to NetGalley and the publisher and all parties involved, I did not realize it wasn't read by a narrator, but it was read by like a computer-generated text-to-voice program, which was really weird. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, but it certainly was not nearly as good as a human narrator. So there are these 2 teenage boys who are assistants to rival magicians at the World's Fair in I think like 1901. They are obviously competitors, but because this is a Sean David Hutchinson book, they also like each other. On the prompt and the cover alone, I don't know that this is something I would have picked up. It's very YA romancy, but I read Sean David Hutchinson before to some success. I loved We're the Ants. I've read a couple other books by him that I haven't liked as much, so I was already not totally sold going into this book, and I thought it was okay. However, throughout the reading process, I was keenly aware I am not the reader that this book was written for. My experiences reading YA over the last like year or so have been such a mixed bag that I think I just kind of, unless it's like literally like just high fantasy, I think I need to like kind of wash my hands of YA, certainly of YA romance, because I think I'm just like too grizzled to really appreciate it. Like in this book, some of these romantic declarations, I was just like, you are 16. Relax. Eat a Snickers. My God. So dramatic. So over the top. Oh my God. But yeah, I did kind of finish this book. In the second I finished it, I was like, why the hell did I read this? This book did not need me. I did not need this book. So that's obviously not ideal and not the note I wanted to end the month on. But that was the sixth and final book that I read in October. And that is all I have for today. So thank you for watching as I limped through this month's wrap up. I was just not firing on all cylinders. So far in November, I am reading less but more in depth. We have that to look forward to. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!